Good afternoon, everyone. The Ranter is back for yet another rambling diatribe of the news of the day. Obviously, I haven't done this in a while, and I don't know. I guess I was hoping that you know, with things that were supposed to calm down, that my cathartic need to do this would be less and less, given that I wouldn't be so impromptu needing to rant. But it seems that even after we have results in from 50 states, a electoral win, which was considered a landslide according to Trump when he got the number 306 himself in 2016, given a 7 million vote majority, making it over 80 million votes for Joe Biden. Still, for the current and future one term, one time only President Donald Trump just can't quite concede or accept this. Now, from my point of view, this concession, I I don't need it. As long as he's removed, that's fine. But what disappoints me is everybody else. Now, I had said multiple times that if you kept Donald Trump isolated, that, even as president, his antics is only the work of one person, and the adults in the room that could placate him and then treat him, pat him on the head and treat him as a rubber stamp for their agenda, but otherwise wouldn't go along with his lunacy, well, that didn't materialize. People fell in line, and many people who you thought, even if you did not have much interest in Republican politics or conservatives, you at least thought they were still human, and that they had their different point of view, but they were, what's the platitude? Good Americans, good family men or women, etc., etc. They just have a difference of opinion. Well, that's not the case, apparently, because some of these people, as we saw over the years, decided to break with reality, break with congressional and senatorial norms, and damn near advocate against democracy itself as a side with Donald Trump to their political graves. I mean, it's one thing of being a hanger-on sycophant, people who hang out at the party and hang out with the star of the party, the entourage, because that's their meal ticket. But it's another thing entirely when you hitch your political star on somebody whose actions and activities as president has been called into question multiple times, and that there hasn't been any single measure that has not been challenged and or overturned in one form or another. I mean, there's not too many successes that you can actually point to Donald Trump in a positive outlook and go, well, that's notch one for him in his legacy. And even if you can find something positive, it wasn't his idea. And it becomes one of those things where, something good happens during a presidential administration. The president has nothing to do with it. But since he's in office and he's sitting in the chair under his administration, it was under his watch, so therefore you give him praise for it. This goes beyond Donald Trump. I mean, you can say certain measures that Obama was sitting at the time that he may not necessarily had anything to do with, but the credit was given to him because it was on his presidential watch, and so on and so forth down the line of presidents. But here we are, nearly on January 2nd to January 3rd of 2021. Finally got the year of hell over, so for as far as we know. With the pandemic being botched at levels that is incomprehensible in real life. This botch that has been done in our country from the top of our administration on down is something you would see in a movie. There should be dramatic music playing when the botch was occurring, and then the flashbacks of like when you find out the reality of what was going on. And you just, it's hard not to rehash this, where it's like we find out that on February of last year, President Trump knew how serious COVID was. So much so that he told Bob Woodward privately how serious it was, that it was more serious than the most stringent flu, that it is airborne, that you can catch it from the air. And yet in public, 180, downplaying the seriousness of COVID, downplaying the need to wear masks, making public spectacles of people who were wearing masks, saying that while they're wearing masks and asking them questions, he tells them to take off the mask, they refuse to. So I guess you're being politically correct. No. No, they weren't. And in the weird balancing act of trying to personalize COVID in the United States towards him, while at the same time not really doing anything about it, as long as he gets any credit for anything positive, and he had nothing to do with it if there's anything negative that comes from it. I see on my favorite social media, from my Facebook group that I'm an admin of, Middle America, that people are praising him for the travel restrictions due to COVID. Oh, thanks, boss. Other countries have done this months earlier. We waited till we had 330,000 deaths before we decided, maybe we should take this seriously enough to restrict travel. The problem with how the pandemic was so mismanaged is that there are people out there that just need that little shred of doubt, and they will run with it. He gives them the shred of doubt through his behavior, through the mischaracterization, the misinformation that he does, the downplaying of the seriousness of COVID, downplaying the message of his own coronavirus task force that was put together and Mike Pence was supposed to man. But people out there who just will take a shred of fictional doubt and they will run with it. They will use it as a justification for not wearing a mask, or understand the sacrifices required in order to stabilize us. Pardon, I'm stuttering. No one wants lockdowns. No one wants to be wearing masks every time they go out. No one wants to do that. Other countries have gone through their serious critical mass in their own coronavirus cases and deaths. We saw that early last year when Italy, at least northern Italy, first locked down, then the whole of Italy locked down. And we were like, quirking our eyebrow to it. It says, is that really that serious? Well, yeah, that's that serious. But the thing is, these places that took this seriously early on stabilized it and reduced it. Now, of course, a second wave of this is now going through the countries and everyone is gripping on it, but nonetheless, these countries hit their peaks and then went down. And now they are ready to ride that wave again. We, on the other hand, did not have this moment where we stabilized and we went down. Not really. And half the reason that is because of political misinformation that feeds people into believing that, no, they don't have to do this. Or they make it into this faux political statement not to, where it's other people's lives that are affected. See, that's the one thing about these people who go and talk about, they try to mockingly pick up the pro-choice anthem of, hey, my body, my rights, right? The thing is that, yeah, it's your body, it's your rights, and if you were the only one being affected by it, then yeah, then the choice for yours would have be less of a question. However, when it is the the possibility of not you only getting affected, but affecting other people around you, from friends, loved ones, family, total strangers, during times where you could catch it and be asymptomatic, and therefore you don't feel sick. And yet you are typhoid Marying all over town because of your rats. How many times have we seen gatherings of proud people who are not wearing masks, who are intentionally not wearing masks because they don't want to? It's their rights. And they're doing a conga line, and it turns out later that members of that group were getting COVID. And we're spreading it from those engagements on. How many stories of like hindsight, this 2020 is like, oh, maybe we should wear a mask. Maybe we should have taken it seriously. You know what? Those type of stories can be accepted probably mid last year. You know, maybe around summertime. That was probably around the last time these type of hindsight is 2020 revelations should have the nod of the head, is that we understand. Not afterwards. Not now when it's now 2021. And it's infuriating when you have both sides of the aisle were playing the COVID politics. You know, it's nice for the Democrats to come up and try to be the ones that are standing up and for everyone's health, you know, advocate for wearing masks. And then their leadership goes and tries to have the little perks, have the little vacations where they're not wearing masks. Do what I say, don't do it as I do. You see, that's at best a perceptional problem that needs to be corrected. At worst, that hypocrisy does nothing. That helps nothing. So Democrats better mea culpa that. Acknowledge it, ask for forgiveness for it, move on. The hypocrisy on the right side, for so many of those senators and congressmen who are on the Trump bandwagon of downplaying COVID and talking about only 1% of the people are going to be affected, so why bother do stim checks, or why bother slow down the economy over it, you know, for the safety when only 1% of the people was going to die from it. Some of those people at the same time, you know, would catch COVID themselves. But of course, they have such good health care in their Senate and in their Congress and in the White House and associations with the White House. From the big man Donald Trump himself catching it and having a weekend at Walters, have a nice cocktail to clear that up. So it's no big deal. Don't be afraid of the COVID. You know, it's easy not to be afraid of the COVID when you have 24-hour doctor support that have access to a cocktail of drugs to clear that up. It's easy for not to be afraid of COVID when you're a friend of a president, so that you can have your own weekend at Walters or wherever and have your own cocktail. But the majority of Americans do not have that luxury. There were people from last year up to last week at the end of the year that dies days after diagnosis. The congressman from Louisiana who died from COVID, I believe he was 41, 1 year younger than me. probably in a better condition than I am, nonetheless died. A state representative in Virginia, my state, in the past few days has died from this. A congressman's son has contracted it. It shouldn't be necessary to hammer home how serious this is. But COVID has intentionally been made into a political football and is now interwoven in the madness of certain people who are outgoing, even though they don't want to be outgoing, in their fan base. The COVID relief bill that passed, on its face, is a piece of shit. It absolutely is a piece of shit. Are there benefits in there? Absolutely. This is one of those things where we had to deal with this, have to swallow it, and then just go, take what you can get, know that this thing is full of pork, know that this was connected with the omnibus bill with the defense spending. There are things in the COVID bill that has nothing to do with COVID. Unless, arming your local naval base and making sure that they're up to date on their detachments of airplanes is COVID related. See, they mixed that in with the defense spending bill. $600? In the time of the unemployment protections and the eviction protections was being thrown out, $600? Half of what was given the last time around? That's ridiculous. And thing is that we would accept it, rightfully complain about it, but we would accept it. Here's the thing, though. Trump throws in his monkey wrench of $2,000 that he won't sign it unless there's $2,000 in it. There's a myriad of things that little hand grenade caused. And people were throwing praise for Trump for doing it on its face, without even bothering and examining this. Mitch McConnell wasn't going to do another $1,200 check for Americans. It took 9 months of negotiation just to get them to agree to a $600 one. These inhuman bastards in their gated communities with their senatorial checks and health care, who do not frankly give a shit about anyone, and I don't understand why you keep voting them back in when they don't represent your best interests. But there you go. They already passed the election cycle. People like Mitch McConnell has nothing to fear. And the stark reality is, even if somehow the runoffs go in the Democrats' favor and the Democratic majority becomes the power of the Senate, Mitch may revert back to what he was before the Republicans took that back over back in 2010. And still you can obstruct from the position of minority, excuse me. Probably doesn't want to, obviously. You probably want to just keep it, because then you keep the agenda going, keep the calendar going. What's next? The power of the majority has that ability. They won't have that anymore. But beyond that, there isn't really any political fear in Mitch McConnell. So what does this $2,000 hand grenade do? First of all, people who praise this on Trump. Trump knows full and well that Mitch was not going to go for this. That this is just another one of those Joker agent of chaos moments. What could have been was that this proposal if was pushed, would have been one of those things where it could blow up the COVID relief bill if it was pushed, because the Senate would not have it on the floor, thanks to Mitch and people like Mitch. And again, the current COVID bill as it stands is awful, but it does have some benefits. Not only the $600 check, but various other things, including the startup money for the distribution of the vaccines. If this bill had been vetoed by Trump, as he promised he wanted to do, or said he was going to do if there wasn't a 2,000 check involved in it, then all that other benefits would not go anywhere. They would lay stagnant for week after agonizing month, while you get no benefits, while you could be out in the street, while you can't find that next job since COVID take 2 is occurring and states are being fidgety about whether or not to lock down again. But around the same time, COVID politics, as disgusting as it is, does find a way to do some maneuvers. So the Democrats seize on this without batting an eye. They're not going to. They didn't flinch at the fact that it was Donald Trump that offered this up. No. In the name of politics, that doesn't much matter who it goes for. And the interesting part of that is that one of the first people to praise it and to try to run with it are the Democratic candidates on the runoff in Georgia. See, they jumped onto that before the Republican counterparts did. And Republican counterparts didn't even want to talk about it until it was Trump who wants it. So if Trump wants it, Trump's fan base wants it. It says Trump's fan base is what people are hitching their political lives on, and they're fearful to lose. Then they have to try to attach themselves to it as well. So the Republican candidates also now jump on board of this, do the $2,000 check thing. In the Senate a few days ago, Democrats tried to make an unanimous consent in the Senate to allow the 2,000 checks in, and Mitch slapped it down. Mitch again slapped it down. Mitch slapped it down, saying that, the 2,000 checks is socialism for the rich. What a statement loaded with hubris. Didn't we just pass some piece of shit bill in order to less fund the people in the United States, but fund more the corporations? Isn't that socialism for the rich? More money for the CEOs for their golden parachutes as opposed to the people that are actually working? I don't know. Again, whereas Trump lives in a world without consequence. A lot of these rich senators, rich congressmen, whether they're Trump loyalists or not, they too live in a world without consequence. It's nice to make these lofty statements and then hide behind your gated community because there will be no answer back to it or reprisals. It's one thing, you go onto a news channel and you say your piece, in opposition to something like, say, what Mitch says. Well, Mitch doesn't have to see that. He doesn't have to respond to that. So, other people's opinions don't much matter because they carry no weight. There is no consequence. Mitch is reelected, so he's secure for the next 6 or so years. And the American people suffer. Because both sides, Republican and Democrat, you can gauge who has more culpability and responsibility on this. But both sides bear some blame on this. They're playing the politics while people are suffering. Uncertainty adds to the worry of COVID. All the misinformation that had stalled the progress where we as the greatest country on the planet fall so behind from every other country who are smaller, less population, but no less have their shit together. And if they haven't reduced their numbers by the time the second wave had hit them, they're more prepared to deal with it than we are. It was important to start this on COVID because whatever political reindeer games that we're going to discuss back and forth between Republicans and Democrats, liberals, conservatives, Trump, Biden, whatever, 349,000 people died. And it is a valid question to ask. Was that necessary? Had we not taken this shit seriously? From both sides, just can be fucking adults. For me, it gets frustrating when you deal with people who praise Trump for what he does when he does nothing for you. He doesn't care about you. Even the power of the presidency, he doesn't care about. Not in the abstracts. It is all self-indulgence. How to continue to make that money. It's all about ego. And it's the same thing as this. I wondered out loud the last number of videos how he would leave the office when his ego cannot handle the fact that he lost. And people make excuses for his loss. People will back his fraud story, his flailing on Twitter. His legal team, will make these grandiose hearings, and you're supposed to take whatever they're saying as the evidence as gospel here that they're presenting, but they're all TV spectacles. And why they're not that important is because none of this stuff hits the courtroom. Nearly all of the court cases have been thrown out, including at least 2 at the Supreme Court level where they didn't want to hear it. I'm glad I was wrong upon the recent Supreme Court pick that, given the situation and the timing and Trump's own words on having her put on the court because it would help him get reelected. He said that. That wasn't an implied, that wasn't a passive thing, that wasn't something that we misconstrued what he meant. He said that specifically because he knew he would contest this that would go into the courts. It's again one of these things where you feel like you're watching a movie. And the reality of the situation Whereas you see the reality, people around you see the reality, but some people just choose to disbelieve reality. They want to do a recount in Georgia. Fine. They recount the votes once, twice, thrice. Still goes to Biden. They want to match it with signatures. Fine. They do that. All certified. Goes to Biden. Still, we just... So therefore, let's send death threats to the Secretary of State in Georgia. Let Trump advocate that the governor, who was a super mega pro-Trump acolyte, well, since he's not, since he's not like betraying his job in order to satisfy the needs of his patron, well, then he better resign, or he better get kicked out. In January 6th, 4 days from now, there's supposed to be this pro-Trump rally in D.C. that Trump himself has been promoting, and he wants it to be a wild protest. People are quick to jump to take the veil away from the statement that says that he wants these people to violently protest. To get wild? What does that mean? We can speculate and assume that. There's an article on Middle America you can find on Facebook. Ben and Sori, good people. Find them on YouTube. They do a lot of reaction stuff on music. They're very good. There's an article on there. Some of these Trump protesters are already saying that, you know what we should do? We should just storm the Senate. Stop them from certifying. Commit violence. Pull out the DC traitors. When Fox News crews were down in Georgia, or down in Florida, when they were seeing these protests going up, because of the news people at Fox, and not the personalities, not the Hannitys, obviously, but the news people at Fox are seeing the reality of the situation and then reporting on the reality. Well, the crowds called them traitors. Traitors to the almighty Trump. The thing is, why are we to take all these statements seriously? Not just them blowing steam. Is that, yeah, we can make assumptions on what they mean, or what Trump means about a wild protest. We can speculate on that. But what we cannot assume, and we cannot speculate, because we know for fact that such rhetoric, loose-lipped talk coming from Trump has inspired people to violence. It has already happened. There are multiple examples of it. Now, people will hear this and say, oh, you're saying that all Trump people... No. No, obviously not. But let's say, for the sake of argument, 73, 74 million people that voted for Trump. Majority of which are not, let's say they're not firebugs, they're not kleptomaniacs, they're not pyromaniacs, they're not totally in the tank for Trump, that they had their motivations, they have their reasons. Maybe it was just because there's an R next to the name. And, it's just, I'm Republican, I vote Republican, whatever. That happens on the other side too. That happens with Democrats too. They say even the diehard pro-Trump fan base, majority of which, yeah, they get whipped up. Yeah, they're passionate. They're buying, they're believing, the rhetoric. They're drinking the Kool-Aid. A majority of them, even if they're toting weapons, are not going to do anything violent. Let's say in a group of 100, there is one. Which means in a group of 1,000, there's 10, and so forth. All it takes is one for there to be a tragedy, for there to be a horrible event. This is broken record time because I'm going to go through the list yet again of the people that had been inspired by the loose-lipped rhetoric and recklessness of Donald Trump. During his campaign, 2 people decided to beat the shit out of a homeless man and urinate on him because they thought he was illegal. When Trump heard this story, he just waved them off and says, oh, they're just being patriotic. A Trump superfan who had his van all decked out in Trump swag goes from place to place. He has pictures. You can find pictures of him amongst the Trump crowds during the campaign. They catch him trying to mail bombs to Trump political rivals. A Coast Guard lieutenant amasses a stockpile of weapons and performance-enhancement drugs in order to make sure he's able to do what he wants to do, was caught before he could act. He had a list of Trump rivals politically and Trump critics in the media. And then you have Patrick, who drove 9 hours from his home in Texas to El Paso so that he could kill the invaders. You can find bits and pieces of Trump's rhetoric on immigrants, migrants in his manifesto, inspired to kill. And this ratcheting up is, you know what? It's not just Trump doing it. In order to keep up people protesting in Arizona, the Arizona Republican Party asked the mobs of people, are you willing to die for your president to stop the steal? The problem with this type of irresponsibility on this massive scale, that where you have no ratcheting down, there is no tempered moment where there's no one of any authority that goes, all right, it's over. It's over. We have fought the valiant fight, but it's over. Time to go home. No one dares really say that because they don't want to piss off the Trump fan base. Trump certainly doesn't give a shit to say it because he doesn't care about this country. He never did. He wants a raucous, wild protest? And you think a responsible leader would want that? And if you're supporting him and you're bobbing your head, ask yourself why. Do you not take civics? Do you not know what it is to be a president or a senator or a congressman? What it means to actually say that you're abiding by the Constitution? Because throwing out the Constitution as a justification for like not wearing a mask or whatever, that's such fucking nonsense, just shows me you haven't read it. That is the scapegoat. That is the excuse for behavior. Oh, the Constitution. You're violating the Constitution. I'm not. Trump declares that the runoff is illegal and invalid because he knows that things are probably may not go his way, so therefore it's illegal and invalid. He declares it. Well, the thing is, a declaration from a president in our system of government is meaningless. It doesn't have to be Trump. It could be from Trump to Obama, going all the way back to Washington. A declaration is something kings do that matters. Because, monarchies and autocratic situations where the figurehead declares, then yeah, what Caesar says is law. That's not the American system of government. And I find it funny, even within the Congress, how many people are so sycophantic to Trump, how they will sacrifice their own pledges to democracy in wanting desperately to overturn that democracy. Because I hate to break it to you, but 2 months out from the election, it is no longer the search of the truth between the fraud and whatever. This is now definitively the overturn of the will of the United States, of its citizens. People go, oh, what about the millions of people who are against this, who voted for Trump? We're speaking for them. 80 million plus says otherwise. Do you not understand that? And I'm pretty sure that the majority of those 70 million plus that voted for Trump, I'm sure a majority of them are not that sycophantic fan base. I think it's a good portion of it. I don't think it's all of them. I'm not going to, as an American, I'm not going to throw away other Americans and just assume because they voted one way or another way that they're all the red hats. Or they're all ready to band together in some Civil War militia. Right now, any effort to stop the election cycle from fulfilling itself, stopping Joe Biden from hitting his inauguration and being the President of the United States, is no longer a search for the truth. It's no longer fighting a fraud. It is usurping the will of the American people. And to segue back a little bit to the whole COVID relief thing in the Georgia runoff, what the miscalculation is for Mitch, even though he's so secure in his power, he doesn't believe that $2,000 stim checks will survive, even though now sycophants like Lindsey Graham wants to bring it up as a separate thing because he's a Trump loyalist and Trump said it, so therefore. But Lindsey also knows the narrative. And this narrative is going to be pushed home into Georgia. You see, before all this lunacy was happening, and we were going to have the Georgia runoff, I had a sense that, given how the numbers were, that it would be a split. That Warnock would win his, Ossoff would not win his, because Ossoff was behind against Leffert. Or was it Purdue? No, it was Purdue. He was behind against Purdue. Warnock was ahead against Leffert. So I kind of thought that it would be like that split. Now so much attention has been thrown into Georgia by both parties. And not only that you have the political pressure put to bear to energize the people of Georgia to vote, you have Trump acolytes, this lid, whatever fuck this lawyer is, who comes out and says, no, don't vote in the runoff. Don't vote for the Republicans in the runoff. This is the Trump guy here. Supposedly the Republican, right? For the Republicans. He's telling Republicans not to vote in the runoff. And then later on, in another one of these fever dream public events he was doing, he's now saying that the Republican candidates should be arrested. He recently said that John Roberts on the Supreme Court was a pedophile. This is like QAnon on steroids, and it is a C4 charge against the Republicans in Georgia. Are you? So you have all that happening. Screw that shit up. Then you have Mitch in the Senate being presented with Trump wanting a $2,000 check added to the COVID relief fund. His buddies want that. Mitch doesn't want that. And Mitch has the power to say no to that. And then what you have here is the narrative that Democrats can take to Georgia that as long as Republicans are in control of the Senate, there will be no $2,000 stimulus checks going to needing Americans. They are denying you that. Make do with the $600 from the scrap of their table. Because anything more than that, well, that's just socialism. When they give millions and billions for their corporations. See, that's capitalism. Giving millions and billions of dollars to corporations, capitalism. Giving $2,000 to human beings of this country, that's socialism. Figure that shit out. So as long as the Republicans remain in control of the Senate, you won't get your $2,000 check. That is the narrative. I think Lindsey Graham figured that out. That's why he's trying to push for the $2,000 check. It's been a while since I did this. A lot of things were going on in my life that kind of made me withdraw from this. You know, some things go on that is even worse in politics, and you have to focus on that. So when I'm able to take a respite from those sorrows, and then come and flip this shit on and see this going on, it's like just why? Why is anyone at this stage backing Trump? He has nakedly shown he is interested only in himself. Is owning the libs so important to you that you'll watch your country burn over it? This is what's going to be January 6th. This is going to be yet another example of President Nero playing on his Twitter while his country burns. The only lawful way for Trump to remain in office now, there is none. There isn't. There is no lawful way. If he actually wants to remain in office, he'll have to stage a coup. He'll have to incite violence. Maybe not himself. I don't think he would ever take the responsibility or direction to directly advocate for it. He will apply it. One of those off the cuff, offhand remarks or something that's thrown onto Twitter, which not a direct link, not a direct correlation, but nonetheless clicks on the firebug in certain people who are that weak-minded that they feel inspired and incited to violence. Because we've seen this happen already, multiple times. My friends and acquaintances, it is important for the stability and the health of our country that we get beyond Trump. I do not believe in aggression, even if it's aggression coming from my side. We should not go back to the Obama years, as Joe Biden's certain picks in his cabinet seem to indicate. It's about us going past where we are. Because when we go past it, that means we are learning from it, learning from the mistakes of it, so we don't do it again. There's certain things that was laid bare during this Trump administration, ironically enough, is in kind of a positive way. There were a lot of things that we considered assumptions. That no, a president wouldn't do that. No, a president wouldn't do that. Well, yeah, they can. He did. There were things that we heard on the news multiple times. The Hatch Act, the Emoluments Clause. They whined about it on liberal media. And why I say they whine is because saying something and not doing something is whining. You say that they're in violation of the Hatch Act? Fine, enforce it. Well, we can't. Why? Say they're violation of the Emoluments Clause. Yes, you are. Well, enforce it. We can't. There's certain things that was like considered gentlemen's agreements that were not necessarily laws. They're not necessarily things that you can tell a person, no, you can't do that. Because every president up to this point, even Richard Nixon, respected the office. You just had 4 years of someone who didn't give a shit about the office, didn't give a shit about the country or the government. Did whatever he wanted without consequence. No one, throwing out words on a segment of a news show, Hatch Act, Emoluments Clause, Logan, means nothing if you don't do anything about it. We got to push past this. We have to reinforce the guidelines and the rules and the laws that governs a presidency. Secure the checks and balances. Even if it's against Biden. Because, you know what, Biden, I made this clear, is not my first, second, or third choice. No president, no Democrat or Republican should be afforded more power, more protection than any other president or any other citizen of the United States. The only thing that kept Trump from being indicted was a stray memo from the Department of Justice. Not a rule, not a law, a memo, an opinion that a president, while sitting in office, should not be indicted for crimes. That's not a rule. That's not a law. but is adhered to given who was in the Department of Justice, because every president that comes in, appoints their people. And again, it's not just Trump on that. Anyone does that. I mean, Nixon had his own attorney general at the time, uh, carry water for him until he was removed for criminal acts, and then the dominoes started to fall. The presidency is going to be a little dramatic. The presidency has been defiled. It has been corrupted in ways and in manners that makes Nixon's own activities still seem respectable. The presidency needs to be restored. And it's not just changing the seats, changing the names. It's not going to be Joe Biden that restores the presidency. It is the effort of everyone to revitalize and restore the presidency through the checks and balances of making sure people just can't do the shit that they want. The presidency as a job, I always felt, was something that you would have to be insane to really want. To feel that legit amount of patriotism to sacrifice your life for a presidency. And I understand, get what I mean by that. You sacrifice your free time. You're not on an 8-hour a day job here. You're lucky if it's a 16-hour day, where you have some private time, and that's usually for sleep. That you can be called at a moment's notice 24 hours a day. The phones are ringing off the hook nearly 24 hours a day, at least for as long as you're in office, from day one. That's why one of the things I always dismiss is this day one bullshit. Well, when I get into office on day one, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. No, you're not. That's a campaign slogan. You may want to. I'll give the assumption that you may want to. But you get in that office, phones are ringing already. Because this country is not, waiting for a grace period. Shit is needing to be done now. And it may not be in the lineup of your itinerary. I mean, I've questioned when Obama went into office, the certain things that he did, in the order of which he did it. When he came in, when he came in 2008 and 2009, he came in with a majority in the Senate, majority in the House. The sea of blue that we probably will not see in our lifetime again, at least my generation. But it feels like it got squandered. I mean, could have tried for healthcare when he had these majorities. But he didn't have them by the time he rolled around, and it was a slug out for it, and it became what it is because of that conflict, because of certain things that were just pushed out and had to be amended, had to be switched up, and until it gets systematically neutered over the years. Basically, trying to get at as I'm rambling here, which is the nature of ranting. The presidency needs to be restored. Not only with new person in the White House, but all those norms that were destroyed has to be repaired. In the end, if you really want to believe in this country and believe in those lofty, venerated ideals, then the president has to once again become the servant of the people. Not be a figurehead, not to be an autocrat without a crown, not to do whatever he wants because he wants to, and not allow his own reality to be propped up because of his fan base. Makes everyone scared, and so they better agree with him when he says bullshit. Glimmers of hope on that is that, you know, the Senate, Republican-led Senate, overridden Trump's veto on the Defense Spending Act, because Republicans will be Republicans, and defense spending, especially responsible government people outside of the cronyism and the corruption, wants to keep the government rolling, and that veto was going to put a brick through that. So that's a glimmer of hope that there are still adults out there. All right, guys. I did an hour ranting, just a stream of consciousness. I may do another one, hopefully, maybe before inauguration, or maybe in a couple of days after if there's the Senate certification happens, without there being this drama that somebody said, "Oh, I'm going to object." Pro Trump. Let's see what happens. Maybe in 4 days afterwards, we'll see if there's any drama coming towards these protests. The Ranter rants, because his urge to rant is rising. I'm back. Yay. See you later.